America's thought leaders. The Rachel Maddow Show, December 20th at 9 on MSNBC.
We're back. The legal battle over gay marriage is now one step closer to going before the Supreme Court. Supporters of Proposition 8, which bans same-sex marriage out in California, brought their case before a federal appeals court today. And David Boies and Ted Olson were once at odds in the Bush versus Gore case, jointly argued against the ban on gay marriage. David Boies joins us now. He's an attorney for American Foundation for Equal Rights. He's also chairman of the firm Boies, Schiller, and Flexner. And Chad Griffin is the board president of the American Foundation for Equal Rights. Gentlemen, let me start with David Boies. Could you give me, David, a layman's case for striking down Prop 8?
Sure. Marriage has been ruled to be a fundamental right by the United States Supreme Court 14 times over the last 100 years. And the question is, should that fundamental right be available to gays and lesbians? What we proved in court was that depriving gays and lesbians of the right to marry harmed them in very significant ways and harmed the hundreds of thousands of children that gay and lesbian couples are raising today. We also proved that preventing gays and lesbians from marrying had no social benefit to anybody else. It didn't help heterosexual marriages, obviously. It didn't help anybody else in our society. So there was no rational basis for depriving these people of this fundamental right.
Let's go to Chad Griffin for a response to what you just heard.
Yeah, Chris, thank you. The legal arguments and political arguments are so important, but also in this case, there are 4 plaintiffs, and those 4 plaintiffs and their families were seated in that courtroom today. And every single day we continue to have state-sanctioned discrimination is doing grave harm to those plaintiffs, to their children, to their families, and to the millions of other young people across this country, whether they're from Fresno, California, or Little Rock, Arkansas, or Washington, D.C. And as long as we have state-sanctioned discrimination in this country against a class of people, it gives license to others to discriminate.
Let me ask you, Chad, let me go back to actually David on this. Does your argument hold up if you were to say it would be equally valid to make this argument in the early days of our republic? Had this argument been made in the late 18th century, would it have seemed credible, or how would it be different? What's changed in terms of your understanding of the Constitution, or what would have been the understanding of the Constitution, since this is, you're arguing, is a fundamental right to equal marriage rights?
I think there are 2 aspects of that. First, I think one aspect of that is that the bias that we see against gays and lesbians today is really a product of the last 100 years. People talk about this going back generations and centuries. In fact, there was much more tolerance of this in past periods than there has been.
When did we have
century.
Same-sex marriage in this country?
You've never had same-sex marriage in this country. You've had same-sex marriage in other ancient societies, and we demonstrated that at trial. But you've never had same-sex marriage in this country. The question is whether, recognizing as we do now the equality of all people in our country, not just the words, but the reality of it, should we extend this fundamental right to them? Remember, when this country was founded, we the people was essentially we white male property owners. It's been the expansion of what it means to be equal from the beginning.
Let me go to Chad. Should the American people get to vote on this, or should it be a court decision?
Chris, one's fundamental constitutional rights should never be put up for a vote of the people. Political campaigns are decided upon who has the most money, who has the best political rhetoric, who can put the best ads on television. And one's fundamental constitutional rights should never be put for a vote of the people. I am one who believes in the ballot initiative process, and there are certainly things across this country that are voted on by the people. But a fundamental constitutional right, particularly that of a minority, should never be put up for a vote of the people and decided by a political campaign and who has the best advertising and the most money.
What are the chances, David, of getting Scalia on this, some of the more conservative judges, on the argument that it is a fundamental right, and that they might just jump the fence and join you guys?
Right. We're not giving up on any of the justices, because, I mean, if you look at Ted and myself, it's hard to find 2 lawyers farther apart on the political spectrum.
Right.
And We've always believed from the beginning this was not a conservative or liberal, Republican or Democratic issue. This was an issue of constitutional rights. And conservatives, at least as much as liberals, want to keep the government out of people's private lives. So I think that this is something that we could win. No one ever likes to predict you're going to win 9-0, but we could win every justice on this.
Let me go to Chad on this. Does this have to do with gay orientation, or is this about equality? I'm just trying to figure the marriage issue here. A lot of people argue marriage isn't necessarily about procreation. It's not necessarily about boy-girl. It's only about an association between two people. Give me your philosophy on it.
Sure, there's no question. I mean, look, many of these facts came out in our trial with a tremendous amount of evidence and with two brilliant bipartisan lawyers on our side of this case. And marriage is clearly a bond between two loving people. There was a time in this country that when one said marriage, in many states, it did not mean a marriage between a black man and a white woman.
Yeah. Okay.
And then,
well said. We're moving on. We're with you. Chad Griffin, thank you, sir, for joining us. David Boies, good luck with the Odd Couples case out there at the Ninth Circuit. It's one of the great stories in history. When we return, let me finish with what I think people are looking for when they say they want President Obama to fight. Is it a metaphor? Do they mean it? Fight with his fists. You're watching Hardball, only on MSNBC.
Funny how